I'd love to hear your breakdown on him because people are so high on him, including myself, and I think justifiably so. I can't imagine more adverse circumstances for a player's career to begin than his did last year and the way he handled it. So through your legendary quarterback's eyes, what are you seeing in Herbert so far?
It's all good, isn't it? I think the key to his start last year and coming off the bench without any preparation is that he played a lot of football at the University of Oregon, and he played in a lot of big games, obviously. They played in Rose Bowls and beat Wisconsin in his last college game. So he was used to the big stage. And also in talking to him, he would tell you that not having any prep for that game as a starter maybe actually helped him because he didn't have to worry about things. He just went out, it's the old saying, I just went out and played football. And now that he's had another offense to learn with the new head coach and Joe Lombardi as offensive coordinator, the thing is that as smart as he is and as cool and talented as he is physically, I just don't see any downside, Greeny.
Greeny, and Dan Fouts is with me here. You are 70 years old, and a happy congratulations on that. And you are, at this point, only 2 years older than Tom Brady, who continues to dominate the National Football League. I mean, what? How do you explain, as we get set to watch Brady kick off the season tomorrow night, at the age of 44, and people inside the organization saying they think he's primed to have one of his best seasons ever? How do you explain this?
I don't think we can. We mere mortals can explain it. Having played the position and have talked to other guys of my era, we just shake our heads. Obviously, he knows how to take care of his body. Obviously, he knows his limitations as far as exposing himself to big hits. But at 44 and soon to be 45, it has been remarkable, no question about it.
It's something that if I had suggested to you, can this happen ahead of time, you would have said it's impossible, right? If you and I were talking, take Tom Brady's name out of it. If you and I were talking about football 5 years ago and I had said, can a 44-year-old quarterback be as good as any player in the entire National Football League, would you have thought it possible?
Well, only George Blanda has done this, and George basically was a kicker until forced into action back in the end of his career, and
right.
He played very well, but he did not take the beating, over the years constantly that Brady has. Greeny, back when I worked in San Francisco at KPIX, my assignment was to interview the top college prospects in the Bay Area, and one of those top prospects was a kid named Tom Brady at Sarah High School in San Mateo. And I got to tell you, if you look it up on the internet, you'll see the interview, and you'll see that Tom Brady at 18 years old looks a lot like Tom Brady at 44.
What do you remember about it? What do you remember thinking of him when you talked to him then?
Well, he was very poised, obviously, very smart. Physically, he looked about the same. He was, about 6'5" and, over 200 pounds. But the thing was, is I asked him, those tough media type of questions, Greeny, right? Like, what do you have to improve upon to make it at Michigan? And he says, well, I've got a good, strong arm, but I need to work on my speed.
That's funny. That's the one thing that I guess never quite came to him, and I guess it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. Dan Fouts on the Goodyear Hotline with you for every mile on the road to greatness. Goodyear, more driven. Actually, that's an interesting thought, because in the era in which you played, and again, for anyone listening to this conversation not old enough to remember, Dan Fouts is one of the great quarterbacks that ever lived and was in his generation the most prolific guy with the most prolific offense there was. And in your generation, Dan, the quarterbacks who could run, like the Fran Tarkentons of the world, those were the exception. Now, the guys who stand in the pocket, a guy like Brady, and people will look at a guy like Mac Jones who wins the starting job in New England, they have become the exception. How do you see that going into the future? Do you believe long-term there is still a place for the quarterback who is, quote-unquote, a statue, stands in the pocket and just flings it?
Well, every pass play, that's the design. The design isn't for the quarterback to buy time. It's designed to get rid of the ball. And the pocket is the safest place because the offensive linemen are taught to protect that, that eye in the storm right there, and that's the middle of the pocket. So the game swings back and forth, but how can you argue with the success of Super Bowl winning quarterbacks? You go right down the list. 90%, I would argue with you, are pocket quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. There's a Patrick Mahomes thrown in there because of his, unique abilities, but you ask him, he would rather throw from the pocket, although most of his big plays and spectacular plays come out of the pocket, but that's not the design.
Greeny and the great Dan Fouts here talking football with you. I want to talk about the situation Dak Prescott finds himself in tomorrow night. I can't imagine a player having more things working against him than he does going into this opener. He hasn't taken a hit since last October. He's barely been able to throw in preseason because he had this trouble with a strained lat. And he's starting this game against a really good Tampa defensive front that is particularly strong up the middle without his all-world offensive guard in Zach Martin. Yeah. So when you factor all those things in, like what's a reasonable expectation for Dak tomorrow night in the opener?
Well, look at the beginning of the game and watch how he handles the first series, and watch how the coaches coach that first series and the play selection in that first series. Confidence, because of all those factors you mentioned, has got to be built, and it's got to be built quickly. So that, to me, is going to be the key for Prescott and for the Cowboys, basically, because here they're going up against the world champs in their own ballpark. A tall task, obviously, but those are so many negative factors that have to be countered immediately by the Cowboys.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.